When President Abacha of Nigeria was alive, I visited with him. And he told me that the IMF and the World Bank offered him tremendous amounts of money. And he said, thank you, but no thank you. We have enough revenue from oil that we can take care of ourselves. Nigeria was moving toward becoming that independent black nation that would suffice its needs from within. But in this book, The Economic, whenever you were deprived or you did not accept the loan and the conditions of that loan, then they would send what they called the jackals to try to undermine your government, even assassinate the leadership, or they would send an army. So in the case of Nigeria, it was the assassination of Abacha.
South Africa, who's got wealth beyond the wildest dreams, and yet the South African does not control the wealth of that country.
When I visited South Africa, we had a chartered plane on a world tour. When I got off the plane, Brother Gil, there was a man standing on the tarmac wrapped in chains. And I looked at him, and we went to the hotel. And when we got to the hotel, the same man was there in chains. And the message he was telling me was, we're not free, brother. We're still in chains. I applaud Madibo. What a great mind and a great man. He assumed power on the strength of the vote of his people. That power could have been turned into something very ugly to destroy the country. But he patiently waited for a new generation to develop, highly learned, that they could take over sections of the economy that they may not have been prepared for at the time that he won the presidency. Madibo was very wise, but he built hope on the promise of the enemy. They promised him that they would put electricity, that they would help him build 100,000 new homes, and they would help him do this and that. And when I visited there again, Johannesburg was gone. Like it was in Gary, Indiana, when Gary was a great industrial city, but when our brother Mayor Hatcher became the mayor, the whites who controlled the economy moved out of Gary to Merrillville and Sherrville, and they built a community economically fine, but Gary died. And when I last went to South Africa, Johannesburg was dead. And the beautiful hotel, 5-star hotel that I was in was empty. And when I talked to this Madibo's ex-wife, Sister Winnie said, they promised my husband so much, and they gave him very little. So when a man of his stature stands and promises the people, because behind him was a promise that they never intended to keep, his image then becomes damaged. And even though history will record him as one of our great giants, South Africa today is still suffering. The black people in South Africa are still in great pain. The economy is in the hands of the whites, the Asians, the Arabs, and a few blacks. So South Africa's story is the same as the story of black people all over the world. And this is why, Gil, Elijah Muhammad came with a message to the black man. Because there's something evidently missing in us. We are not inferior. We are the fathers and mothers of civilization. But colonization and slavery has done something to the African mind that we need, as Elijah Muhammad said, to be resurrected from mental death. Now just think about that statement, Brother Gil, mental death. Because life is activity. And the activity of life is seen in business. The business of providing food, clothing, shelter, education, well-being, and health to your people. If we in America, being blessed to have graduated from some of the finest universities in this country, yet we are not providing food, clothing, or shelter, jobs, or health to our people, but are instead begging our former slave masters and their children to do this for us, then there's something in us that's missing that needs to be given.
But there was a fire in the 60s, especially among young people. SNCC and the students were very active, angry, vocal, and yet we don't see much of that today. What happened?
In the 60s, Brother Gil, when you and I were young men, younger men, we were filled with the inspiration of Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X. And we were just a few days away from Marcus Garvey and W.E.B. Du Bois, and we were enriched with something that this present generation is missing. When we were segregated, you know, in the South, we governed our own schools. We had our own motels, hotels, restaurants, bars. We had gas stations, bus companies, insurance companies. We were doing something and keeping some of our dollars revolving in our own community, allowing us then to build an economic base for ourselves. But when the enemy saw that the money was staying in that circle, and that money he wanted in his circle, then integration was offered to black people, not for us to really become the friends of white people, but this hypocritical friendship was to lead us away from self into their arms, because now we could sleep in the finest hotels, eat in the best restaurants, etc., etc. So our money left home, and now it's still doing the same thing. We get nearly $800 billion a year out of the American economy, but that money comes in, goes out. Very little stays among us. So when we got public accommodations bill, the right to vote, and it looked like we were going to reach the promised land, our people of that generation didn't teach the young the history of our struggle. When I spoke with Harry Belafonte, who is one of our noble heroes, Brother Harry told me that he spoke at Howard University. And he said the thing that saddened him is that the students at Howard did not know their recent history, much less the ancient history of our struggle. So if we don't know the struggle, then the struggle can't continue. And that's the difference, Brother Gil, with the Jewish community and our community.